For 7 centuries, historians have painted the same story. The Mongols were unstoppable. They swept across continents like wildfire, building the largest land empire in human history. But here's what most people don't know. This legendary empire that conquered from China to Eastern Europe actually suffered crushing defeats that changed the course of world history. Today, we're breaking down the battles that brought the mighty Mongol war machine to its knees. What if I told you that the same empire that terrorized Europe and Asia was stopped cold by samurai warriors, Vietnamese jungle fighters, and even Javanese kings? These weren't just minor setbacks. These were catastrophic failures that cost thousands of lives and reshaped global politics forever. If you're ready to discover the hidden defeats that textbooks barely mention, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more shocking historical revelations that will change how you see the past. Before we dive into their failures, let's understand just how powerful the Mongols became. In 1206, a tribal leader named Temujin united the scattered Mongol clans and took the name Genghis Khan, meaning universal ruler. Within decades, his empire exploded across the known world. The Mongols didn't just conquer territory, they revolutionized warfare. Their military strategy was built on 3 pillars that made them nearly invincible: mobility, psychological warfare, and adaptive tactics. First, mobility. Every Mongol warrior was essentially a mobile cavalry unit. They could travel up to 100 miles per day, switching between multiple horses to maintain this incredible speed. When European knights were still figuring out how to mount their heavy armor, Mongol horsemen were already raining arrows from 3 sides. Second, psychological warfare. The Mongols perfected the art of terror. They would offer cities a simple choice: surrender and live, or resist and face total destruction. Word spread faster than their armies, and many cities surrendered without a fight. Third, adaptive tactics. Unlike other armies that stuck to rigid formations, the Mongols studied their enemies and adapted accordingly. Fighting Chinese siege specialists, they learned siege warfare. Facing heavily armored knights, they developed new arrow types and battle formations. At its peak around 1279, the Mongol Empire controlled over 24 million square kilometers, roughly 16% of all land on Earth. They ruled from Poland in the west to Korea in the east, from Siberia in the north to Vietnam in the south. This empire connected the Pacific Ocean to the shores of the Persian Gulf. Under their control lived roughly 100 million people, about a quarter of the world's population at the time. They controlled the Silk Road, the world's most important trade network, making them incredibly wealthy. Chinese inventions like gunpowder and the compass flowed west, while Islamic mathematics and European goods flowed east. The success of this empire rested on brilliant military leaders. Genghis Khan himself was a tactical genius, but he wasn't alone. Subutai, often called the greatest general in history, conquered more territory than any other commander. Over 30 modern countries fell to his armies. He was the mastermind behind the lightning-fast European campaigns. Jeb, known as the Arrow, earned his name by shooting Genghis Khan's horse out from under him in battle, and then joining the Mongol army when Genghis was impressed by his skill. Mughali conquered northern China, while Batu Khan established the Golden Horde that would dominate Russia for centuries. But even these legendary commanders couldn't win every battle. Let's explore the defeats that proved the Mongols were human after all. Our first major defeat takes us to September 3, 1260, in southeastern Galilee. The Mongol Empire, now led by Kublai Khan, had just conquered Baghdad, the center of Islamic power, for 500 years. Nothing seemed capable of stopping their westward advance into Africa and deeper into the Middle East. But the Mamluks of Egypt had other plans. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were elite slave warriors, trained from childhood in the arts of war. Led by Sultan Qutuz and his general Baibars, they prepared for what many thought would be their final battle. The Mongol force, led by General Ketbuka, was smaller than usual, about 20,000 men. But these were battle-hardened veterans who had conquered half the known world. They expected another easy victory. The battle began with typical Mongol tactics. Their light cavalry charged forward, fired volleys of arrows, then retreated to draw the enemy into pursuit. But the Mamluks had studied Mongol tactics for years. Instead of charging blindly forward, they held their ground. When the Mongols advanced for their killing blow, they walked into a trap. Mamluk heavy cavalry, held in reserve, smashed into the Mongol flanks, while infantry pressed from the front. The Mamluks managed to slaughter almost the entire Mongol force, including General Ketbuka. This wasn't just a military defeat, it was a psychological earthquake. For the first time, the Mongol Empire had been decisively beaten in open battle. The defeat forced them back to Iran and established the western boundary of Mongol expansion forever. The Mongol failures in Japan rank among their most spectacular disasters. Kublai Khan, ruler of the Yuan dynasty, had conquered China and now set his sights on the Japanese islands. In his mind, Japan was just another small kingdom that would quickly submit to Mongol power. He was catastrophically wrong. The first invasion came in 1274. A combined Mongol-Korean fleet of about 900 ships carrying 40,000 warriors crossed the Korea Strait and landed on the Japanese island of Kyushu. The initial battles went well for the Mongols. Their superior numbers and gunpowder weapons gave them early advantages. But the Japanese samurai were unlike any enemy the Mongols had faced. These warriors followed a code of honor that made death preferable to surrender. They fought with a ferocity that impressed even battle-hardened Mongol veterans. More importantly, the Mongols had never mastered naval warfare. When a typhoon struck the invasion fleet, hundreds of ships were destroyed and thousands of warriors drowned. The survivors retreated to China, but Kublai Khan wasn't finished. 7 years later, in 1281, he launched an even larger invasion, 4,400 ships carrying 140,000 men, making it one of the largest naval invasions in history until D-Day. This time, the Mongols were determined to finish the job. The Japanese, meanwhile, had spent 7 years preparing. They built a massive stone wall along Hakata Bay and trained their samurai in new fighting techniques specifically designed to counter Mongol tactics. When the second invasion fleet arrived, they found not the easy target of 1274, but a fortress island defended by determined warriors. For 2 months, Japanese samurai launched night raids against Mongol camps, preventing them from establishing a proper beachhead. Then, nature intervened again. Both naval campaigns against Japan, one in 1274 and one in 1281, turned into complete fiascos. Another massive typhoon, which the Japanese called kamikaze or divine wind, destroyed most of the invasion fleet. The defeated Mongol Empire lost most of its naval power, and its naval defense capability declined significantly. The cost was enormous. Estimates suggest that over 100,000 Mongol and Korean warriors died in these 2 invasions. The financial burden was so great that it weakened Mongol control over China and contributed to the eventual fall of the Yuan dynasty. Vietnam presents one of the most fascinating examples of successful resistance to Mongol conquest. Unlike the dramatic single battles in the Middle East or Japan, Vietnam's resistance was a masterclass in guerrilla warfare that lasted over 30 years. The Mongols first invaded Vietnam, then called Dai Viet, in 1258, expecting another quick conquest. They captured the capital, Thang Long, modern Hanoi, and forced the Vietnamese court to flee. But taking the capital didn't mean controlling the country. The Vietnamese, led by brilliant generals like Tran Huynh Dao, developed tactics specifically designed to neutralize Mongol advantages. Instead of meeting the Mongols in open field battles where their cavalry would dominate, the Vietnamese melted into the jungles and mountains. They poisoned wells, destroyed bridges, and burned food supplies before retreating. When Mongol columns advanced into the countryside, they found empty villages and hostile terrain. Vietnamese fighters would appear suddenly, launch devastating attacks, then disappear back into the jungle. The Mongols tried three major invasions in 1258, 1285, and 1287-1288. Each time, they could take the major cities but couldn't control the countryside. The Mongol invasions of Vietnam resulted in defeat for the Mongols, although Vietnam did agree to pay tribute to avoid further bloodshed. The most famous Vietnamese victory came at the Battle of Bac Dang River in 1288. Tran Huynh Dao used the same tactics that had defeated Chinese invasions centuries earlier. He planted iron-tipped stakes in the riverbed at low tide, then lured the Mongol fleet forward during high tide. When the tide receded, the ships were impaled and destroyed. This victory was so complete that the Mongols never seriously attempted to conquer Vietnam again. Of all the Mongol campaigns in Southeast Asia, Java was the most far-flung and ranked with the Japanese invasion as the most disastrous. The invasion of Java in 1293 shows how political cunning could defeat military might. The trouble began when Kublai Khan sent envoys demanding tribute from King Kertanagara of Java. Instead of submitting, the king insulted the envoys and sent them home empty-handed. This was essentially a declaration of war. Kublai Khan assembled a massive invasion fleet, over 1,000 ships carrying 20,000 Mongol and Chinese warriors. The journey to Java took months, and many ships were lost to storms in the South China Sea. When the fleet finally reached Java in 1293, they found the political situation had changed completely. King Kertanagara was dead, killed by a rival named Jayakatwang. His son-in-law, Prince Vijaya, approached the Mongols with an offer: help him defeat the usurper, and Java would submit to Mongol rule. The Mongols agreed, thinking they had found an easy solution. Combined, Mongol-Javanese forces quickly defeated Jayakatwang's army, but Vijaya was playing a much deeper game. Vijaya later betrayed his Mongol allies, and thus their invasion of Java ultimately failed. Once Jayakatwang was defeated, Vijaya turned his forces against the Mongols. The Chinese and Mongol warriors, exhausted from months of tropical campaigning and weakened by disease, were no match for fresh Javanese troops fighting on their home territory. In the end, the invasion ended with Yuan failure and strategic victory for the new state, Majapahit. Prince Vijaya founded the Majapahit Empire, which would dominate Southeast Asia for the next 2 centuries. The surviving Mongol forces were forced to retreat to their ships and return to China. They had lost thousands of warriors and hundreds of ships for absolutely nothing. In fact, they had inadvertently helped create a powerful new empire that would resist Chinese influence for generations. While not technically a defeat in battle, the Mongol withdrawal from Europe in 1241 represents one of history's most important what-if moments. The Mongols had just won decisive victories at the Battle of Mohi in Hungary and the Battle of Liegnitz in Poland. At the Battle of Mohi on April 10, 1241, Mongol forces defeated King Bela IV's Hungarian army, and European resistance seemed to be collapsing. But then, Ögedei Khan, the great Khan of the Mongol Empire, died suddenly in December 1241. Mongol law required all generals to return to Mongolia to elect a new leader. Batu Khan, who was leading the European campaign, had no choice but to withdraw his armies eastward. This wasn't a military defeat, but it was a strategic failure. The Mongols never returned to Europe in force, and the withdrawal gave European kingdoms time to develop new military technologies and tactics that would make future Mongol invasions much more difficult. These defeats revealed crucial weaknesses in the Mongol system. Naval warfare remained their greatest vulnerability. Storms destroyed their fleets in Japan, and river tactics defeated them in Vietnam. Jungle and guerrilla warfare also proved problematic, as their cavalry-based tactics were less effective in difficult terrain. More importantly, these defeats showed that the Mongol Empire was overextended. By the late 1200s, they were trying to control too much territory with too few troops. Local knowledge and terrain advantages began to outweigh Mongol military superiority. The psychological impact was equally important. Once word spread that the Mongols could be defeated, resistance movements grew stronger. The myth of Mongol invincibility was broken, and future campaigns faced stiffer opposition. These defeats also contributed to the empire's fragmentation. Failed campaigns drained the imperial treasury and weakened central authority. Local Mongol commanders began acting independently, leading to the empire's eventual division into separate khanates. Despite these defeats, the Mongol Empire left a massive mark on world history. They connected east and west like never before, facilitating trade and cultural exchange on a global scale. Technologies, diseases, and ideas spread along Mongol trade routes, changing civilizations across Eurasia. The defeats themselves became part of national mythologies. Japanese kamikaze, Vietnamese guerrilla tactics, and Mamluk military prowess all trace back to these victories over Mongol forces. These battles proved that even the mightiest empires have limits. The Mongol Empire's military innovations, combined arms tactics, psychological warfare, and adaptive strategy, influenced warfare for centuries. Even their defeats taught valuable lessons about logistics, naval operations, and the importance of understanding local conditions. Perhaps most importantly, these defeats showed that determined resistance could succeed against overwhelming odds. The samurai of Japan, the generals of Vietnam, and the Mamluks of Egypt all proved that superior strategy and knowledge of local terrain could overcome numerical disadvantage. The Mongol Empire's defeats remind us that no power, no matter how mighty, is truly invincible. These battles changed the course of history, saving civilizations and creating new ones. They showed that courage, strategy, and determination can triumph over even the most fearsome military machine ever created. The next time someone tells you the Mongols never lost a battle, you'll know better. From the plains of Palestine to the jungles of Java, from the islands of Japan to the rivers of Vietnam, brave warriors proved that giants can indeed stumble. If this deep dive into forgotten history fascinated you, smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories that reveal the hidden truths behind the world's greatest empires. What other invincible forces in history would you like us to investigate? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next video where we continue uncovering the shocking secrets that changed our world forever.